Good evening everybody, this is a how-to video. If you watched my previous video you'll know that I've fitted a Lucas 679 tail light unit to my bike. Having fitted Lucas indicators and the generally sort of oldish looking feel about my bike, I felt that the rectangular stock tail light looked a bit incongruous. Now I'm not dissing the light itself, I'm sure that many people have got it on their bikes and they're perfectly happy with it. I just felt it wasn't right for my bike, and I like that 679. It was what they fitted to British bikes when I started getting into them, and so I wanted to be able to fit one of those to my bike, but to retain that cast alloy bracket at the back, because that bracket holds the tail light, it holds the indicators, it holds the rear mudguard, and also the number plate bracket, which is particularly good I think on the Interceptor. It's a good supportive kind of bracket, so I wanted to keep all that and basically have the 679 light unit on. So this was a sort of prototype really, although it's finished fine, it's on the bike, it's rock solid, everything works. I made a critical error along the way, and if you're thinking of doing this modification, as one or two people have said in the comments on the previous video, I'll mention that later in the video. One critical but small error caused me a few issues to correct, and I'll outline that in this video. So if you want to do this modification, the first thing you need is a backing plate for the light unit, and I bought an original 1964 one thinking they were rare. Then I discovered that on eBay. I paid 14 quid for mine and had to strip the paint and make it look good and so on. But you can buy these, which are an exact replica, just as good, better actually. I think they're about 20 quid. So one of those is necessary. You'll see on the right hand side of that picture there is a lug with two holes in it. And the problem with that is that's the number plate holder, and it gets in the way. So it's necessary to modify this bracket, and I'll outline exactly what I did. So the first thing to do is to cut off that bracket, the number plate bracket, which is exactly what I did, and I've shown it in this next photo. So I basically used some, just normal steel cutting shears and cut it off. It's dead easy to do, they're not even expensive shears. So if you look at that plate there now, you've got two dimpled holes at the top. That's where I made another slight error of judgment. I decided that I was going to flatten those with a hammer and an anvil. You don't need to. The bolts go through there to hold the light unit on. And the light unit has a plastic backing on it, and the two screws below, they're the same. Screw holes. They hold on the light unit into that plate. Now below those you'll see two holes I drilled, and there's the first error I made, which is the left hand one is slightly higher than the right, and that is critical. The distance between those is, the bolts go through those to hold that onto the cast alloy bracket, and because I'd got one slightly higher than the other, I needed some wiggle room in order to straighten it up. It was cockeyed on the bracket. So it's essential that those holes be drilled exactly level. And I was going at it a bit, thinking, will it work, will it not, I'll just give it a go. I should have done it properly in retrospect, and I'd have saved myself a few little issues, which I resolved. The hole underneath those was already in the plate. Now, that plate has a lip all the way around, and in order to make it fit properly, I found it necessary to grind that off. So I removed that lip from the bottom of each wing of the light all the way down, just so that it would go on properly. You can see the hole I drilled, rather large, and so as I say, get those holes exactly horizontal. Measure it. I didn't, I thought, oh yeah, I'll trust my eye. I wasn't even sure it'd work, and so I should have done it properly really, but I resolved it in the end. So grind off that edge from below those wings, and then the next picture shows the actual plate itself, once I'd sort of hammered out the dimples unnecessarily and ground off the edge, drilled my holes, one of which badly. Yes, mea culpa, I acknowledge that, as you can see there. And there it is, ready to go onto the cast alloy bracket, once it's painted obviously. As I say, that hole being slightly higher on the left, yeah, caused a few problems, which I'll show you in the next picture. So don't bash your dimples, that's the moral of that story. And if you're going to drill things, make sure that you're drilling in the right place. However, got there in the end. And as you know from a previous video, I used PJ1 satin black case paint on this, which came out as a very good result, as expected, because it's amazing stuff. So the cast alloy, this then bolts onto the cast alloy bracket, which is exactly how the stock tail light is attached. It doesn't have captive bolts or anything. You've got to push bolts through and tighten them up on the other side of the cast alloy bracket. That also needs modifying. So this next picture shows the cast alloy bracket itself, and you'll see there are two holes at the bottom of the picture. That's for the number plate mount, and that's exactly how they're produced. Above it you've got a central hole, which when you look at the stock bracket, it's a sort of oblong hole, and you need to basically file out and make bulges either side so that the bulb holder of the Lucas taillight unit will go all the way through. So I just used a file. It took an awful long time. The other thing I had to do, which you won't have to do, I had to enlarge the two holes at the top there, because I needed that wiggle room to be able to sort of rotate the tail lamp assembly just a few irritating degrees, because my holes in the plate weren't lined up properly. So I enlarged those. You won't have to do that if you get your holes right on the plate to start with. And there is a little cutout on the bottom of that hole there, which is for the earth wire. It's important to have that. It's not visible obviously when the tail light's on, but you need that to put the earth wire through. So there's the tail light unit upside down. As you'll see, it's got a plastic backing. The bottom of the picture you've got two nuts and stainless. They're in the dimples on the other side. And then below that you've got a couple of screws going in, the two pre-drilled screw holes that you saw on the metal plate. And then above that, next to either side of the reflector, you've got a hole where it should be, and you've got a gaping one hole on the other side, on the left, because I hadn't got my holes lined up. So had I got that right, it would have had two nice holes. So a bit gash, but worked out. If you look at the top of the reflector, there is some solder. And now you have to sand that a bit with wet and dry, otherwise you can't really solder onto the galvanising or whatever it is, thin stuff. And you'll see there's an earth wire coming out there, and I drilled a small hole in the plastic all the way through, and that corresponds with the hole in the metal plate. Around the edge of that plate you'll see rubber. Now I couldn't find the right gasket, I couldn't find the rubber seal anywhere at all. So what I did in the end was to get an old cycle inner tube and slice a very thin, with a pair of scissors, and cut a thin strip of rubber, and I put it all the way around. So that's sitting inside the metal lip, and I glued it on with some super glue with activator. It does actually work, it does seal the lens. So unless somebody can find a gasket, you'll have to make one, otherwise I think water would get in. So there you have it so far. You've got the earth wire soldered on to the body of the light bulb holder. You've drilled your holes in the back properly, and this is a view from the other side now of that. Sorry, it's the same side. So if you look at that there, you've got your two nuts at the top, and you've got the hole on the right hand side next to the reflector near my little finger. You've got the earth cable stuck out the back end, and then on the left, you can't really see it because there's no light there, but it's that's where the big hole is. So I can't stress enough, get those holes level. If I did it again, it would be a piece of cake. So it was a learning curve. I don't claim to be infallible by any means, and I wasn't convinced it would work in the first place. So, you know, I thought we'd just crack on. So there it is. And the two lugs that stick forward, threaded holes, that's for the lens, which screws on from the lens side. This next photo shows the actual light unit itself, as you'll see any second now. Here we go. Now there's the light unit, and there's the metal plate, and you can see, again, my little finger, you've got the light bulb holder. That's why you need to enlarge the hole in the cast alloy bracket. You've got to get that through it, and it has like a beveled rim on the left hand side of that bulb holder, and you've got to remove enough metal on the cast alloy bracket for that to go right in, so that the metal plate is flush up against the actual cast alloy bracket. Now this next photo shows the plate itself attached to, already painted at this stage, it's PJ1, and attached to the cast alloy bracket. So if you look at this picture, you can now see, there you go. So you've got your two, I've got two button-headed stainless Allen bolts at the top. I've got two crossheads that go straight through bolts, and you need to use those. They come with the tail light, because if you put big Allen bolts in, you'll not get it to go flush against the cast alloy bracket. You'd have to move it up. I didn't want it too high. So those four fasteners are holding the plastic backing of the tail light into the metal plate, and it's now bolted inside the cast alloy bit with numerous washers. As I say, if you get your holes lined up, you won't need to jiggle it from side to side like I did. Now in terms of wiring, you've got the tail light comes with a red wire and a black wire, and that's it. And it's supposed to earth through the body of the light. It doesn't work, same as the indicators don't. On the Royal Enfield, the block connector and wiring earths as well, so it has to be connected. So I removed the wires from the original tail light and used the block connector, obviously. So the connections are, on the wiring Royal Enfield side, you've got green goes to the red of the tail light unit, the grey wire goes to the black, and then the black wire you see in the middle there, that is the earthing wire. So the earthing wire that you've soldered on and then pulled through connects to that. I used a bit of solder on each one, then some shrink tubing. So that's green to red, grey to black, and the earth one. So you end up with this. And that's the actual tail light unit itself, mounted and bolted onto the cast alloy bit, and your two holes underneath are for the number plate. Now the lens is I think they call it a beehive lens, and as you'll see in some pictures on my previous video and a picture on this one, it's an effective lens, and it's got a reflector above it, and the lens itself is just screws in with those. I used the standard screws that came with the light unit. The galvanised are not my favourite stainless, but you know, I could always replace them at some point if I have to, if they start rusting, because we can't have that. This next photo shows a side view of that same assembly. So you see it's flush right the way up to the top there. And the holes at the side obviously are for the stock indicators with the anti-swivel slot on them. In my case, you know, I don't have the stock indicators on. So it's a good fit. It's tightly up against the cast alloy bit. Here's another view from the other side. and there's your wires at the back. So the green wire, you can see, that's my earth one that's soldered to the body of the light bulb holder. And then you've got one red wire showing there. The next photo shows again the same wiring. So I don't like buttering a wiring harness, as I think people know from previous videos, but I don't mind cannibalising a part that I'm going to replace. So I would advise doing that. Just use the earth wire that's on the block connector of the original wiring harness. So there you've got it. Look, you've got your black wire and your red wire coming out of the light bulb holder. The green wire that's soldered onto the bulb holder itself, and that's prior to me I snipped them off fairly short because they're quite long, the ones that come with the light unit, and that's prior to me soldering on green to red, grey to black, and then the earth wire, as you can see in this next photo. And that's prior to extending it with the cannibalised wiring off the old light. And as you can see, the two holes at the bottom, they are the ones that the bolts go through to hold that backing plate and the light onto the cast alloy bit. And that's it. So I hope that helps if anybody's considering doing this, as at least two people are. And the finish is PJ1 in my case, but I'm sure people will do what they would like. And there it is. That's with the brake light on. I cable tied it on so that the lever was pulled in, and that's it done. So if I were doing it again, don't bash the dimples, get the two holes properly done, and it would be a lot easier than it was for me mucking about with washers and things. So lesson learned on that one, but it's worked out in the end, and I have straightened up that right indicator because it is droopy, so I sorted that today. So there you have it. That's how I did it. If you've got any questions, my email address is in the video description. You can always, send me an email and what have you. And in the meantime, take care on your bikes, and I look forward to any comments, and I'll speak to you again soon. Bye for now.